In a dusty Nebraska territory at the edge of a brutal winter, a 38-year-old widow named Sarah Brennan stood alone on her failing homestead, 2 miles from the nearest neighbor. While drawing water from her well at twilight, she discovered a young Sioux scout collapsed and bleeding out in her yard. Helping him meant defying every settler in the territory and possibly losing her land, her safety, even her life. But she didn't hesitate. She dragged him inside and fought through the night to save him. What she didn't know was that he was the nephew of a powerful chief, and what happened next would bind two peoples together in a way no treaty ever could. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? The well rope creaked in Sarah Brennan's calloused hands, and that was when she saw the blood. It pooled dark against the hard-pan clay, trailing from the cottonwood grove toward her homestead in a stuttering line. Twilight bled purple across the Nebraska plains, and the wind carried the smell of sage and something else. Copper, urgent, wrong. Sarah's breath caught. She was alone out here, 2 miles from the nearest neighbor, and every farmer in the territory had spent the last month whispering the same warning. Sioux war parties. Stay inside after dark. They'll kill you soon as look at you. She should have run for the cabin. Instead, she followed the blood. He lay crumpled beside her well, young, maybe 20, his buckskin shirt soaked black around an arrow shaft buried deep in his shoulder. Fever glazed his eyes. He didn't reach for the knife at his belt. He just looked at her, chest heaving, waiting for her to decide. Sarah's hands trembled. Caleb Rourke had stood in this very yard 3 days ago, jabbing a finger at her face. You let one of them onto your land, Sarah, and we'll bane you out ourselves. The other settlers had nodded, grim and certain. But she'd buried a husband to infection 2 winters back, held his hand while he shivered and begged for water she couldn't cool fast enough. She would not watch another soul slip away. Sarah hooked her arms under the scout's shoulders and dragged him toward her door, his blood painting a new line across the dust. What her neighbors didn't know, what none of them could know, was that this single act of mercy, made in the failing light by a widow who'd lost too much already, would bind two peoples together in a way no treaty, no law, no border ever could. The door swung shut behind them and the night began. Sarah worked by lamplight, her hands steady even as her heart hammered against her ribs. The arrow had to come out. She heated her skinning knife in the stove flame until the blade glowed dull orange, then poured whiskey over the wound. The scout, Takota, she would learn his name later, bit down on a leather strap and made no sound. She cut. He bled. She packed the wound with yarrow poultice the way her mother had taught her, the way she'd tried with James and failed. Her husband's face flickered in her memory. Gray skin, rattling breath, the fever that took him in 3 days despite everything she knew. Not again, she whispered, pressing clean cloth to Takota's shoulder. Never again. She kept him alive through the night with water, cool rags, and prayers she half remembered from a childhood that felt 100 years gone. His fever broke near dawn. His eyes opened, dark and weary, and he said a single word she didn't understand. Then he slept. The horses arrived with the sun. Sarah heard them first, the thunder of hooves, too many to count, and stepped onto her porch with her husband's old rifle, knowing it wouldn't matter. 24 Sioux warriors ringed her homestead, painted for war, weapons ready. At their center sat a man whose presence commanded the plains itself, broad-shouldered, iron-gray braids, a face carved from stone and patience. Chief Mato. His gaze swept her cabin, her well, the blood trail she hadn't scrubbed away. Where's my nephew? His English was precise, edged. Sarah swallowed. Inside. Wounded. I helped him. Mato dismounted. He moved past her as though she were air, his warriors flowing behind him. Sarah's hands shook on the rifle she hadn't even raised. Inside, Takota spoke rapidly in Lakota, his voice weak but urgent. Mato listened, then turned to study Sarah with eyes that weighed her soul. You could have let him die, Mato said. Your people would have rewarded you. I'm not looking for reward. No. Something shifted in his expression, not warmth, but recognition. You seek to balance a debt of your own. He stepped outside and spoke to his warriors in their language. Then, in English, he addressed Sarah with ceremonial weight. You gave life when you could have taken it. This is a debt we cannot leave unpaid. My warriors will watch over this place until the balance is restored. Sarah's breath caught. You? Staying? Until the debt is clear. Mato's jaw tightened. You are caught between two peoples now, woman. We will honor you. I cannot promise your own kind will do the same. He mounted his horse, and his warriors fanned out across her land, setting camp within sight of her cabin. Sarah stood alone on her porch, the morning sun climbing higher, and wondered what she had begun, and why a young scout had been fleeing fast enough to collapse at her well with an arrow in his back. They came at noon, a dozen settlers on horseback with Caleb Rourke at their head, and the anger in their faces told Sarah everything she needed to know. Rourke reined up hard 20 yards from her porch, his expensive boots catching sunlight, his tailored coat too fine for a man who claimed to be a simple farmer. He'd made his fortune buying land cheap from widows and desperate men, then flipping it to the railroads. He'd offered Sarah $300 for her homestead last month, a quarter of what the water rights alone were worth, and she'd refused. You've lost your mind, Sarah. Rourke's voice carried across the yard, pitched for the men behind him. Sioux camped on your land. You're harboring hostiles. That's treason. They're not hostile, Sarah said, forcing her voice steady. They're honoring a debt. A debt? Rourke laughed, sharp and ugly. The only debt out here is what you owe this territory. Loyalty. Safety. You send them away by sundown, or we'll run you off ourselves. Your land claim won't be worth the paper it's printed on when the marshal hears about this. Behind him, farmers she traded with, shared meals with, nodded agreement. Fear made people cruel. This is my land, Caleb. I decide who stays. Not anymore. Rourke leaned forward in his saddle, his smile cold. I've already sent word to Marshal Hodge. He'll be here tomorrow with a writ. You'll lose everything, unless you sign it over to me today, and I'll smooth this whole mess over. There it was. The real reason. Her well was the best in 20 miles, and Rourke wanted it. The settlers rode off in a cloud of dust and threats, and Sarah stood trembling until Dakota appeared in her doorway, still pale but upright. He gestured toward the barn, urgent, and she followed. Inside, beneath a loose floorboard near the tack wall, Dakota pulled out a leather-bound ledger wrapped in oilcloth. His English came in fragments, pieced together with gestures and desperate clarity. Soldiers, attack our camps. Kill families. Write lies. He opened the ledger, pointing to entries written in an officer's tight script. Say we attack first. Not true. They want land. Push us out. Sarah's hands shook as she read. Falsified reports. Coordinated raids on peaceful villages. Orders signed by a Captain Driscoll. And payments, dozens of them, marked for land acquisition and co-signed by civilian partners. One name appeared again and again. Caleb Rourke. You stole this, Sarah breathed. Dakota nodded. Proof. I run. Soldiers shoot. He touched his healing shoulder. Hide here. They come soon. This wasn't just about her land. This was orchestrated theft dressed up as war, and she was holding the evidence that could stop it, or get her killed for treason. Outside, raised voices drifted from Mato's camp. She caught enough Lakota tone to understand. His warriors were questioning why they protected a white woman when their own people were being slaughtered. Mato's response was firm, but the tension was fracturing. Inside the barn, Sarah stared at the ledger, a receipt written in blood and lies, and knew that her choice was narrowing to a single, terrible point. Rourke wanted her silent and gone. The cavalry wanted their crimes buried. And tomorrow, the marshal would arrive to decide her fate. Sarah sat alone in her cabin that night, the ledger open on the table before her, and read her people's sins by candlelight. Page after page, Captain Driscoll's meticulous hand documented atrocities dressed as policy. August 12, 1866. Encountered hostile Sioux encampment near Crow Creek. Defensive action necessary. 18 hostiles eliminated. But the supply manifest on the facing page told a different story. Rations requisitioned for only 6 soldiers, ammunition expended in amounts far exceeding what any defensive skirmish would require. A raid, not a defense. September 3rd, Sioux aggression necessitates expanded patrol zone. The map coordinates matched land Rourke had purchased from the territory 3 weeks later for a pittance. It was all hay, a blueprint for manufactured war. The financial entries made her sick. Payments to Rourke, to territorial officials, to surveyors who redrew maps while families still bled. One notation reads simply, CR advises provocation yield best results. Recommend winter raids on hunting camps. CR Caleb Rourke. They weren't fighting a war. They were staging one and selling the land before the smoke cleared. Footsteps on her porch. Mato entered without knocking, Dakota behind him. The chief's face was granite, but his eyes held something raw when he saw the ledger. My nephew says you understand now, Mato said. I do. Sarah's voice cracked. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Mato gestured to Dakota, who translated haltingly as the chief spoke. This book holds the names of my brother's family. Dakota's cousins, 4 children, the youngest 3 winters old. The soldiers came at dawn, wrote in their papers that we attacked a supply wagon. His jaw worked. There was no wagon, only children and old ones. Sarah felt tears burn her eyes. This wasn't just evidence. It was a cemetery written in ink. You have a choice, Mato said, his English returning. Keep this, stay silent, and perhaps your people will leave you in peace. Or speak truth, and they will call you traitor. They may kill you for it. If I stay silent, the killing continues. Yes. Sarah stared at the ledger, her hands flat on pages that proved her neighbors, her own people, were orchestrating murder for profit. She could burn it, bury it, claim ignorance. Rourke would take her land, but she'd survive. The lies would stand, the war would spread, and she would live with the weight of every name in this book pressing against her chest until she died. Or she could ride into town, force this truth into daylight, and risk the noose. What would you do? If you held proof that could stop a slaughter but cost you everything, your home, your safety, maybe your life, would you speak? Or would you choose survival and let the lies stand? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as hoofbeats thundered outside. Sarah rushed to the window. Marshal Hodge rode at the front of a 20-man posse, Caleb Rourke beside him, rifles gleaming in the afternoon sun. They stopped at the edge of her property, facing Mato's warriors across 50 yards of dust and tension. Sarah Brennan. Hodge's voice boomed. You're ordered to disperse these hostiles immediately or face arrest for harboring enemies of the United States. Rourke sat his horse with a predator's patience, eyes locked on her cabin. Mato's warriors had already drawn weapons. One spark, and this ground would run red. Sarah looked down at the ledger, then at Dakota, whose shoulder she'd stitched by lamplight while the world slept. At Mato, who'd given his word to protect her when he owed her nothing. The choice was no choice at all. She picked up the ledger, walked to her door, and stepped into the light. Sarah walked forward with the ledger pressed against her chest, and the silence that fell across her yard was absolute. Marshal Hodge, she called, her voice carrying over the dust and tension. I have evidence of crimes committed against the Sioux people and against the United States. Falsified military reports. Orchestrated massacres. Theft of federal land. She held the ledger higher. If you won't read it here, now, in front of these men, I will ride to the territorial governor myself and let him decide who the real traitors are. Rourke's face went white, then crimson. She's lying. She's been living with savages for days. She's lost her mind. Then you won't mind if the marshal reads it, Sarah said. Rourke spurred his horse forward, hand outstretched to snatch the ledger. He made it 3 strides before Mato's warriors moved as one, a wall of muscle and steel that blocked his path. Rourke's horse reared. He cursed, wheeling back. Marshal Hodge dismounted slowly. He was older than Sarah remembered, 50, maybe, with a gray beard and eyes that had seen too much. A Union cavalry officer's bearing still lived in his shoulders, and something in his face told her he'd suspected the rut but lacked the proof to cut it out. Let me see it, Hodge said quietly. Sarah handed it over. The marshal opened the ledger, and his weathered face went pale as he read. His lips moved silently over the entries, the dates, the payments. When he reached the signature pages, his jaw clenched so hard Sarah heard his teeth grind. This is Captain Driscoll's hand, Hodge said, his voice flat and terrible. "I served with him at Shiloh. I know his writing anywhere." He turned a page, and his eyes locked on the payment receipts. "And that's your signature, Rourke." 40 times over. The posse stirred. Men who'd ridden out with righteous anger now exchanged uncertain glances. Hodge read aloud, his voice ringing across the yard. September 18th, 1866. Coordinated action with CR to provoke incident near Platte Fork. Ensure no survivors to dispute account. Payment upon land transfer, $400. He looked up, and the disgust in his face was naked. "You butchered families to steal land, Caleb. You wrapped it in a flag and called it war. Those are lies, forgeries. Shut your mouth." Hodge snapped the ledger closed. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and accessory to murder." Two deputies moved forward, hesitant but obedient. Rourke tried to bolt. His horse made it 10 feet before a rifle shot cracked the air, not from the Sioux, but from one of the settlers, an old farmer named Garrett whose son had died in a skirmish last spring that the ledger listed as provoked engagement. Rourke stopped. The fight drained out of him. Around the yard, men lowered their rifles. Some stayed at the ground, shamefaced. Others spat in Rourke's direction as the deputies cuffed him. The posse was fracturing, the certainty they'd ridden in with crumbling like dry clay. Hodge turned to Sarah, then to Mato. "I'll forward this to the governor and the Army's judge advocate. It won't undo what's been done, but it's a start." He paused. "I'm sorry. For all of it." Mato stepped forward. He moved with ceremony, each step deliberate, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of those made under open sky. "The debt my nephew owed is paid," Mato said. "But I make a second vow now, before these witnesses." He gestured to his warriors, to the settlers, to the land itself. "This woman is under the protection of our people, as long as grass grows and water runs. Any who harm her, harm us. Let no one forget." His warriors raised their weapons, not in threat, but in salute. Mato met Sarah's eyes, and for the first time, something like respect passed between them. Not friendship, not yet, but recognition. Two people from two worlds, standing together on ground that had been soaked in lies, choosing honor over vengeance. The posse dispersed slowly, the men riding away in silence. Sarah stood in her yard, ledger returned to Hodge Stulbag, and watched two worlds, briefly, impossibly, stand as one. 5 days after the arrest, Dakota appeared on Sarah's porch at dawn, fully healed, carrying a bundle wrapped in deerskin. He unfolded it carefully, a beaded belt, intricate and beautiful, worked in patterns Sarah didn't understand but felt in her bones. "For my uncle," Dakota said, his English stronger now. "You are sister friend. Our scouts will watch your land, quiet, always." Sarah took the belt with trembling hands. Tell him I'm on it." Dakota smiled, rare, genuine, and rode away. 3 years passed. By 1870, Sarah's homestead had become something unexpected, a crossing point. Sioux families traded game and hides for flour and medicine. She taught Dakota's youngest sister, Winona, how to clean wounds and mix poultices, the girl's quick hands learning what Sarah had learned from her own mother a lifetime ago. The ledger had done its work. 12 officers court-martialed, Captain Driscoll imprisoned, Rourke's land holdings seized. It delayed the encroachment, bought time, but it didn't stop the inevitable tide. The frontier was closing. Still, Sarah stood between two worlds, older now, grayer, her hands scarred from work and care, respected by both, owned by neither. Her mercy had become a bridge. But not every act of courage ends in peace. Not every woman who defied both sides lived to see the outcome. Watch what happened when a school teacher in Montana Territory made a choice that should have saved lives, and paid a price no one saw coming.